Well, here we go. Episode 8 of The Hybrid Disciple. We've got a couple more left in season 2. I have to tell you, though, this episode is unlike any that you will see before or any we have done since. The guest that we have on the show today is one Ken Arrington. Now, Ken is an author. He's a speaker. He lived in Wales during the pandemic, which I think is pretty awesome. He and his wife and family and all that. They lived overseas during the pandemic, and they were super active in ministry there. And then all of a sudden, Ken discovered this little thing called TikTok. Maybe you've heard of it. And his ministry exploded, and he now lives in Puerto Rico, and it is just it's an insane story. And I had simultaneously one of the most fun times that I've had editing a podcast and recording, and one of the most hands off, because honestly I did some trimming and some vocal work and all of the things that you do to kind of spice some things up. But by and large, this is kind of an unedited interview with Ken. And the second I hit record and the second Ashley and I really said, okay, Ken, let's go, he had already been 5 minutes into some things that he was talking about. And so when you hear the very beginning of this interview, you are literally hearing right after I hit the button to record. And that's what you get with Ken. And it is awesome. And it takes a little bit of time to really wrap your mind around what he's saying. And then all of a sudden you start to click with what he is really resonating with in terms of discipleship and in terms of ministry and in terms of being present with phones and TikTok and social media and screens and all of the things there. And hold on to your hats for this episode with Ken Arrington.
Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom, right? So in America, we often, because we're Americans, so we are conditioned from an early age to think of freedom to do whatever I want, right? I can do whatever I want. I can do whatever I want, because I got the Spirit of the Lord. I can do whatever I want. That's not the context of what that verse actually means. What that verse actually means, it's the better translation is where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And liberty is different than freedom. Liberty is freedom from. It's not freedom to, it's freedom from. It's freedom from. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom from. In other words, it's meaning there's freedom from death. There's freedom from destruction. There is freedom from evil impulses. There is freedom from these things, and freedom from judgment. Freedom from, and that's what a lot of because we're when you're raised. And I don't mean to pigeonhole anybody, because that's how this is going to come across. I'm really sorry. I don't really mean to offend. When you're raised Southern Baptist, when you're raised Pentecostal, when you're raised evangelical, fundamental, a lot of these things, it's God's love comes hand in hand with God's wrath, right? Right? Oh yeah, he's a God of love, but he's going to get you. He's got a big old list of all these things, and that's not what it's about at all in any way, shape, or form. And so when a lot of times when we realize that when we step out of our social boxes, our social the construct that we are raised in, whether it's fundamentalism, whether it's Catholicism, whether it's Orthodoxy, whatever the case may be. When you step out of that construct and look at it, because this is the thing that people don't like to admit, and it makes a lot of pastors, and I'm a licensed pastor, okay, so I get it, but it makes pastors extremely uncomfortable, is that the way we believe is nothing like the first Christians in any way, shape, or form. And when I say that, I'm not talking about the first Jews that became Christians. I'm talking about the first Gentiles that became Christian. We don't believe in or act as a Christian in any way the same as they do, nor are we supposed to. All right, you hear a lot of people go, "Oh, we got to get back to the first church." Blah 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 blah. right? No, not really. We're not supposed to do that. But we can look to them as an example, right? Because we've built these constructs. So when you come out in a lot of these fundamental circles and evangelical circles and our orthodoxy, whatever you want to say, the constructs that we place on that we are raised in, that we place upon our belief, we think that's how people have always believed. So what happens is when we discover a bit of freedom and we discover like, oh my gosh, Jesus, is he really setting me free? The answer is yes. He is absolutely setting you free from not just this religion that is being placed upon us, right? So, I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I don't talk to a lot of people about this. You might identify, you might not. I was a DJ for 7 years in a strip club. All right, one of the largest strip clubs on the East Coast. I was addicted to everything. And this is the thing: is that I can tell people I was a DJ. I can tell people I was addicted to XYZ drugs, like literally everything under the sun. But the minute I throw in that I was also involved as a strip club DJ, a whole bunch of people who are listening to me will shut down. They won't even listen to it because we inflict their judgment. But the thing is I am free from their judgment. I have liberty. The Spirit, right? The Spirit of the Lord there is freedom. The Spirit of the Lord, there is liberty. I have liberty from those judgments because those judgments, I'm free from me. So I'm free from those judgments. You'll hear me say this often. I'm free from me, so I'm free from you. That's why I can take all the heat that gets thrown at me, like on TikTok, because it really doesn't affect me. I lose no sleep over it. Like people are like, dude, how do you do that? I'm like, how do you not? My identity comes from who Jesus says I am. And where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. I am free from judgment. I am free from God's wrath. I am free from all of these sorts of things. And God's wrath, his greatest vengeance, if you want to go back to John 8, and I'm starting to preach, so I'll hush up in a second. But John 8, that's my favorite story. And yeah, people can argue that and there's a lot of information that this was a later addition to the Bible. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. But the story of the woman caught in adultery, right? Jesus, the one who could throw a stone, did not, right? Okay, now here's the thing. Most people don't realize the location of that story was placed there specifically. Jesus is standing in the treasury of the temple. Now, if you also look elsewhere in the Bible, what does the Bible says? What does the Bible say? Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also, right? Okay, so Jesus standing in the treasury of the temple, God's home on earth, right? That's where his treasure is, and there's Jesus. Not throwing the stone. All right? That's where God's heart is, right? That's where God's heart is for all of us. And unfortunately, we tend to inflict, most Christians tend to, I've never seen a faith, and I've been all over the world, and I've seen Muslims doing horrible things to people involved in Hinduism. I've seen Buddhists doing horrible things to people involved in Hinduism doing horrible things to people involved in Muslim. I've seen Christians doing horrible things to other people and everything. But no one eats their own like Christians do.
Amen.
And it's because of these false judgments. And we went off on a little tangent, and apologies there. But I just want to encourage you that if you are, like feeling judgment, if people are feeling judgment, if they are a believer and they're new to the faith and they're feeling all this judgment of their past and who they used to be, that's not Jesus. That's not. And what that is those are people who who say it. And Jen, what I love about TikTok, right? What I love about this audience that has grown on TikTok, which has just been the craziest thing I never imagined in a million years. But what's been the craziest thing about that is it's getting to the people that it needs to get to. And the people that hate it the most are the ones that want the judgment. They want the anger. They want and that's really sad. Mm. It's really, really horrifically sad that happens. And it's sad because it's not just sad because of what it puts onto people. It's sad because of that is the state in which these folks live. And that's where I feel like the greatest compassion, but what I do love is Gen Z is, and millennials and they're picking up on it, like what you guys are doing, is amazing. Like going out into a digital space and pastoring in a digital space and pastoring in a way that looks completely different than a brick and mortar big box church. It threatens people. People are like, well, you can't, you can't have community. What's that church slogan that I absolutely abhor in every way? We do life together.
Oh, I thought you were going the Hebrews thing. Like, well, don't give up meeting. Don't give up meeting together. It's like, man, we are meeting together.
Dude, we are meeting together right now.
Yeah.
Like, my gosh, like if you could have told people 1,000 years ago, hey, one day I'm going to be able to have a device that I carry in my freaking pocket. And I'm going to be able to talk to almost anybody in the world in almost every country in the world with the press of a button, and we're going to be able to share information. Number one, you would have been burned at the stake, but but some people would have listened. Some people would have been like, dude, that's amazing. Like, how can we not do that? And yeah, there is to be something said about like I would say like kind of, my wife and I, she actually just got off a teaching session. But we would say that, our church family is in two different places. One is in the States, one is in South Africa. And yes, when we're in their presence, it's amazing. It's awesome. But this is also community. This is also building friendships that when we met, let's say we went to South Africa and met these folks for the first time, we already knew them. We didn't have to spend, you know what I mean? It's like, we didn't have to spend like a couple of days just really getting to know each other. It's like we knew each other and we like just jumped right into it. But it's threatening. It's threatening. It's threatening to folks that or have that fixed mindset. This is how it has to be. The pastor has to be here, and you've got to have these folks here and these folks here. But none of that stuff is biblical. None of it. I absolutely. I'm going to go on a rant. So anyway, before this gets out of control, I'm going to shush. But I just want to say what you guys are doing is awesome. And it's awesome to be here and just be with people that are experiencing freedom in a way that I think a lot of churches, if they took the time to not be afraid of it, and to see the work that you're doing, and realizing Gen Z and millennials, they're nothing to be afraid of, that they are hungry. They are so hungry. Oh my gosh. I get over 100 emails a day. They are so hungry, and they know what they are seeing on Sunday mornings in a lot of churches, isn't it?
Yep.
They're like, I'm not seeing Jesus. I'm seeing politics. I'm seeing building funds, what kind of outreach? Yeah. All that kind of stuff. So yeah, what you guys are doing, it's awesome. Awesome.
I guess I should do an intro. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this and I'm just going to leave it. Because we caught Ken, like basically he had already hit 60 miles an hour down the freeway and we were catching up like in the movie Speed, like trying to jump onto the bus. And like, I'm just going to leave it because there's a passion and a weight and an authority to those words there. So Ken Arrington joining us on the Hybrid Disciple. Thanks so much for being here. And for really leaning into exactly what Ashley and I have been talking about. And there's a couple of points you made there that I would love to circle back to. But before we get too far afield, I want you to introduce yourself to our entire audience. People will probably know you from your social media presence, particularly on TikTok. But who are you? Why were you in Wales for 5 years? Why were you a DJ at a strip club? Which, by the way, you were in good company. Ashley and I both have very sordid pasts, and we can talk more about those in a little bit. Yeah, and so you're in good company there. Jesus really pulled us out of some really dire things. But enough of that. Who are you, and what are you doing in Puerto Rico right now?
Sure. Long story short, I'm a son, and what I mean by that, I'm a son of God, and that is the identity that I move from, that I flow from. I love Jesus. I had a physical encounter with Jesus about 12 years ago, and in that, completely revolutionarily changed my life. I was raised real quick. I was raised a preacher's kid, son of a preacher. I think I'm fourth, maybe fifth generation. My grandmother was named one of the top 100 women of the evangelical movement in the 20th century. So I come from a long line of pastors, preachers, prophets, apostles, and evangelists, and all that kind of stuff. But I left the faith at an early age. I was fascinated. There were a lot of questions that were off limits in my house. My mom had left my dad and I at an early age, which really adversely affected my dad's ministry career for a long time. I had a lot of deep bitterness at church. I believed in God. I had grown up seeing amazing things, miracles and stuff like that, like stuff that just, I thought it was normal, and I grew up and I just developed this deep passion for religion, but not just Christianity, for other religions as well. And in high school, I really started kind of living a double life. So I had, on one side, I had this, very religious upbringing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But on this other side, I had this fascination with witchcraft, the occult, all this sorts of stuff. By the time I got into college, I was full-fledged, deep into witchcraft. I don't like using the word occult, but that's how most Christians understand it. The word occult just means hidden knowledge, so to speak, and secret societies and all this sort of stuff. After college, after grad school, I realized started like grad school, realized that was not the life for me. I loved the stuff, but I knew I didn't want to go into a college career. So I left that and opened a bookstore. I opened a alternate religions bookstore where all religions were welcome. So at 25, I had this bookstore, people coming from all over the place, all over North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina, to this central hub, this repository of knowledge. And we would all just talk about our religious faiths and beliefs and stuff like that. But then I was in a really bad accident, and I damaged my left leg really bad. I ended up being in a walking boot for about 9 months. And after that, I got addicted to painkillers. And in this time, I had lost my bookstore. I had lost pretty much direction in my life. And I had a friend who was working in a club, and she was like, "Hey, this club I'm at, they need a DJ. You love music. If you see me on TikTok, I'm always wearing like band shirts, right? Like I love music." And so I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And so I became this DJ, and within like a year and a half, I'm working at some of the biggest clubs, and like just drugs are everywhere. I've become addicted to everything. Horrible relationship after horrible relationship, just totally screwball in my mind. And I ended up, my now wife, she met me after I was just out of just horrendous relationship. I was down to 129 pounds. I was ODing, like it felt like every other day. I just wanted to die. And my wife, my soon-to-be wife, my girlfriend at the time, she was amazing. She was so different than anyone that I had ever met or dated, and she gave me an ultimatum. Basically, she was like, "Look, I'm done with this, and I'm moving. So you can either come with me or you can stay here." And I was like, "Well, if I stay here, I'm going to die." And I was like, "All right, so let's move." So we decided to move to New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm the only person on the planet that moved to New Orleans, Louisiana to sober up. I said, because in New Orleans, the spiritual background, right? Like the occult, the witchcraft, the voodoo. And I was like, those are my people. If I can move there, I can just deeply embed myself back in my community, and I can quit the hard drugs. And that's what I did. I quit cold turkey, no rehab, no nothing. And for years, or not years, but for months, it was hell on earth for me and what I put my soon-to-be wife through at that point. We ended up getting married. During this time in New Orleans, I started kind of rising up the ranks, whatever you want to call it, in the spiritual community. I was doing a lot of TV work. I had a podcast, had a radio show. I was in lots of different TV shows. If you Google me, and like from back in the day, a lot of the stuff isn't there anymore, but like all these paranormal shows you see on TV. Then they wanted to give me my own show, so I'm working on my own show. We're putting that together, sign a contract, all this stuff. Then my wife gets pregnant because we got married at this time. So I'm giving you the real short version. So we moved back to North Carolina because we want to be closer to family. I'm working on this TV show, and then at 7.5 months, the baby just stops moving, and this was insane because like this was the perfect pregnancy. And in this moment, like we go to the hospital. We're basically hippies. My wife, like she wanted a home birth, all this sort of stuff, and we were going to have that, but the baby had stopped moving, so they had to do an emergency cesarean, and our son was born brain dead. And we kept him alive for 5 days on life support because he had no upper brainstem function; he only had lower brainstem. So we were looking for that miracle, and during this time, even though we were not Christian, for the family's sake, because my father, minister, her family is very involved in the church. We were like, let's have the baby christened, baptized. So that's what we did, and then we took him off life support, and he died in our arms. But as we were there sitting in the hospital, and he was breathing for the first time without all of these machines keeping him alive. The only way I can describe it is this weight came into the room and like just filled the space, and it was like pressing my wife and I and our dying son together. And it was just like, I refer to it as the presence. And it was this, and it wasn't scary. It wasn't angry. It was just like love, like I had never understood in my entire life. And like you couldn't hear all the hospital machinery disappeared, everything disappeared. And it was just us holding our child. And it was like silence, but there was this peace and this joy. Like it was I'd never experienced anything like it in my life. And what ended up happening is after when our son took his last breath, the spirit, it just lifted out of the room. And it was like it took his soul with it. And I never, in all my studies and everything that I've been involved with, I'd never experienced anything like that in my life. And my wife and I, it was so much joy, even though we just lost our son, we both started to laugh. So she went on this spiritual quest. She started like trying to find the source of this presence, right? So she starts going to churches. She starts doing all this stuff. Me, I go deeper into the deep end because I've got a show starting, right? You know, and about a year later, she meets these ladies. She starts going to church. She starts getting involved, and I'm okay with that. I didn't have an issue with her following her spiritual path, you know, as people in that type of stuff like to say. And she found this, you know, what we thought at the time a great church, and so we got involved. She wanted me to start coming with her. I start coming with her, and you know, I'm seeing the stuff that I grew up with, but it's okay, you know. She's finding hope. She's finding love, and then one day, she's like, I want to get baptized. And I was like, ooh, no, okay, all right, well, yeah, that's all you, bye-bye, you know. She's like, no, I want you to get baptized with me. And I was like, now, hold on now. She's like, you know, we're flesh, one flesh, all that stuff, right? You said that in your vows, right? You know, yeah, she didn't say that. I actually said that, you know. She was very gentle about it. She was like, I would like for you to think about it as well. So I thought about it, and I was like, all right, well, Lord, you know, this is the deal. If you're real, all right, like you know, I believe in a God, right? I'd always believed in a God. I just didn't. To me, it was like the universe, you know, all blah blah blah, all this sort of stuff. And what ended up happening is I went into that baptismal tank, and I came out expecting the heavens to open, dove come down, all that stuff. None of that happened. I was just cold and wet, and I was so upset because I got out and I was like, nothing happened, right? Like nothing happened. Like I was like, why? You know, I don't even know if I believe this. And I just got baptized as a public declaration of faith. I was like, I'm the biggest hypocrite on the face of the planet. I'm an a-hole. You know what I mean? I was like, this is not cool. Yes, while everybody else is celebrating and jumping up and down, you know, because I found my freedom. You know, I'm the biggest faker liar on the face of the planet right now. You know, and so I go change my clothes, and I just go sit down, and the auditorium empties out. And as I'm sitting there, oh man, as I'm sitting there, the whole room goes dark, like my vision. And I explain it like, you know, when, like, I don't know if you've ever blacked out before, but you know how like everything just kind of zeroes in, right? And that's exactly what happened. The whole place just went black. And then there was this brilliant white light next to me. And I felt the presence that was there when we lost our son. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And, like, see, it wasn't, like, I know what he smells like. You know, I tell people cedar, musk, and myrrh. That's what he smells like. And he reached across me. His arm came across, and he pulled out, like, and I explain it like, you're like grandpa, like, you know, your grandpa opens his wallet and he has that big vinyl thing with all the kids' pictures on it. They don't do it that much anymore, but like back in the day, right? You know, so like had all the photos on it. And like, I see all these horrible moments in my life. And I see when my mom left me, and my dad when I was 6, when my dad lost his ministry when I was 8, when I was just lonely and lost and confused from like 8 to then, you know, and just like all the times I'd almost died from drugs, all the times that I had done horrible things to people, when everything. And then when it got to like my son dying in my arms, like all these horrible things. And I hear his voice, and his voice cracked. His voice cracked, and I heard it in his voice. And he said, I never wanted any of this for you. And he disappeared. And I fell out of my chair, and I was on the floor, and that was it. And after that point, it was like, okay, all or nothing. You know, all or nothing. And I haven't always been successful at it. But my wife and I, the one thing you will find out within 10 seconds of being around us is we are all or nothing people. We don't play this game of you know, it's like when we feel the Lord on something, we do it no matter what. So my wife wanted, you know, she had always felt called into mission. I hated that idea. I grew up listening to the missionaries whining in front of churches, asking for more money and giving us this sob story. I sleep on 2x4s, and all this stuff. And I was like, I don't want to have anything to do with that. But that was a passion that she had. And we had a pretty amazing experience at a church where I was just smashed with the power of God and realized this is the life that I'm supposed to live. Within a couple of months, we were in India. And then I've gone to India a number of times, Cuba. And when we go on mission trips, it's not hey, we're going to stay in the resort and we're going to go do this, hey, come on vacation for a week. And while we're there, we'll go feed some poor kids, just take some pictures. I'm going to be real. This is offensive to some people, but this is going to be real. Let's go take some picture with brown kids.
Right.
We don't do that garbage. And so when we go to slums, we go to slums. When I've been on mountaintops with witch doctors, babalawos, vialos that supposedly killed poison missionaries, drinking tea at their house, and talking about Jesus, but doing it in a way because of my past that is non-offensive. That is because what most people don't understand is almost everyone you meet that is involved in the New Age, the occult, and all this sort of stuff, they are the nicest, most loving, caring, considerate, peaceful people you will ever meet in your entire life. And because they really have a heart for helping people. But we brand it as evil because that's what our fundamentalist nature has told us it is. But, some of the meanest people I've ever met are Christian. And so we felt, we were like, well, we're going to go into full-time mission. We're going to go into full-time mission. We're going to go into full-time mission. This is going to be our life. And I was going on mission trips and, all this stuff and seeing amazing stuff. I mean, seeing the stuff you read about in books. I mean, I've prayed for people and blind eyes open, crippled people walking. I have seen stuff. Meanwhile, I've got issues that I still can't get over, but I've seen stuff and I can't explain it. I don't know why, but I've seen it happen. And so we were like, this is our life. And it just never was happening. And then back in 2017, started having these weird, crazy dreams and visions. Saw this tower on a hill, saw a castle, saw this other sort of stuff. And after some discussion over the span of a couple of months, my wife and I are like, I think we're getting called to Wales. I don't know anything about Wales. Why are we getting called to Wales? Why? Because I was finding out that some of these places I'm dreaming of were real places. Mm-hmm. And so we went and visited. We were like, it's definitely Wales. God was all over the trip. So we ended up we didn't sell. We gave away everything we owned, pretty much, except for 15 duffel bags. At the time, we had 3 kids. And ages at that time 4, 2, and 1, and one on the way, moving 15 duffel bags, 6,000 miles. And we got there, and we were there for a couple of months. We ended up opening up a charity, a non-religious charity. And what we ended up doing is during COVID, we got one of those miraculous things, never in a million years. I didn't know anything about running a charity. I didn't know how to raise money for a charity. Basically had any money for ourselves at that point. But Lord said, get a storefront, open a charity. We found somebody who believed in what we were doing. They hooked us up and we get this storefront. And then we had a homeless outreach. We were doing addiction recovery. We had a ministry that went out to prostitutes. But the biggest thing in what we did, there was no sermon required. There was no none of that. Just, hey, let's just watch these people speak because they need to know who they are, and just speak life over them, and not just look at them as a project, but let's look at them as human beings made in the image of a loving God. And that is what we ended up doing. And next thing you know, COVID hits. And when COVID hits, everything shut down in the UK. Like where we lived, you were not legally allowed to travel more than 5 miles away from home. So I could, because I was a licensed minister, I was there on a ministerial visa. And so I started getting in touch with hotels. I started getting in touch with all these different places to get all their toiletries, to get all their like shampoos, to get all their stuff. And I start a program that we started distributing this stuff to nursing homes, to hospitals, because I mean, I don't know if y'all remember, toilet paper used to be really hard to get. For next thing you know, like we get kind of famous in South Wales for like helping all these hospitals, starts getting these letters and like recommendations and awards and stuff. And then after COVID, we had so much income come into the charity through grants and businesses loving what we were doing. We opened up a storefront where literally everything in it was free. Still going. You were not in Wales. It's still going. You come in, and that is a portal to getting addiction recovery, abuse, sex trafficking, all different types of stuff for kids, at-risk youth, and providing all these services free of charge, no questions asked, no judgment, looking at you with the love of Jesus, but not blasting that. Like, in other words, it's like being the hands and feet of Jesus instead of talking a big game, actually going out and doing it. In 2021, we were alerted to a situation here in Puerto Rico. And at the time, I just felt like we were just getting rolling in Wales. But what ended up happening is we found out what's going on in Puerto Rico, the economic challenges that are facing people here. A lot of people, when they think of Puerto Rico in their head, they're like, oh my gosh, this is a tropical paradise. Hey, you got to be loving it down there. The weather, right? And yeah, that's part of it. But what most people don't know is that the average household income in Puerto Rico is only $21,000.
Really?
Groceries in Puerto Rico are 25% more expensive than they are in America.
Mm-hmm.
If you want lettuce, it's $10.
Yeah.
Right. So it's ridiculously expensive. And the folks here are really impoverished because there's some antiquated laws on the books that make things this way. And there's corruption and there's all this sorts of stuff. But a friend of ours just let us know the immense need that people have here. And so we were like, what if we had a community farm where we do what we did in Wales, but what we do here is everything we raise, we give to the public free of charge. Okay, so they can actually use their income for living instead of, that sort of thing. So there's a lot more to it than that. We wanted to have we wanted to build like a retreat, a place that people could come, get their hands in the dirt, actually put into practice the stuff that they read about, these lessons that they learn about that are in the Bible, and actually do that in person, helping their fellow man while also employing the local community and providing food for free to the local community, but also creating a space where people can come and just get away from their cell phones, get away from the digital media, get away from all of these sorts of things and just work with the land and like manifest this kingdom of God mentality, like in a physical location and stay for a week or 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time and work with us. And in turn, we provide back to the community. Because in Puerto Rico, there's a lot of people that come to take the resources that Puerto Rico has. Puerto Rico has to import 85% of their goods and services from the United States mainland. Most of the food that's consumed here comes from the mainland. Everything that is raised here is shipped out. And they can't buy anything from Latin American countries or South American countries because it's a U.S. territory. So everything that comes into Puerto Rico has to come off a U.S. ship or out of a U.S. port. So you got the Dominican Republic that's right next door, right, 40 miles away, grows avocados. You can buy avocados for pennies on the dollar, right? You know what one Haas avocado costs here? $3. And that's not the organic one. That's the normal one. $3 for an avocado that they can get from the Dominican Republic for like 20, 30 cents, but here, so there's a lot. So what we want to do and what we are doing is getting land to begin this thing. And we've been working with, so we are in touch with a number of different resources that are coming, that are coming to do some really cutting edge type stuff. But everything that we do is going to be organic, a lot of vertical farming, lots of stuff like that. So that's what we're doing here. And the reason that is because that's what we felt the Lord said do. So that's what we're doing. So there you go. Long story short, how TikTok got started. About a year and a half ago, April of, I think, 2022. So, okay, almost 2 years now. I really felt like the Lord say, I want you to start a TikTok. And I was like, that goofy app that everybody dances on. I was like, at that point, I'd never even been on TikTok. I'd never even been on it. I didn't have an Instagram. I had an Instagram, never been on it. I had a Facebook because I'm old. I'm almost 50, right? So like I had a Facebook, but like I didn't do anything on other social media. And I just felt the Lord say strong. So I told my wife, and she was like, you sure? And I was like, yeah. She's like, that's what the Lord's telling you to do. That's what you need to do. And I was like, so if you go back and watch those first videos, oh my gosh, agonizingly painful. So painful. And then it was basically like words of, I didn't know what to do, so I was just like words of encouragement, stuff like that. And then one day, I was like, you know what? I just want to be me. I'm a big nerd. I love research. I love history. My degree's in English and minors in history. And then, in grad school, it's the classics. I've written a couple of books that I ghost wrote because that's how I was paying for our life as missionaries for a while. I was ghostwriting books. And so I was writing, books on, ancient Nubia, Egypt, Jerusalem, stuff like that. And I was like, let's do something of substance, on TikTok. So I did this video on how the name Yeshua became Jesus, because actually I had this guy in a class that I was teaching in Wales who was this big conspiracy guy. And he was like, oh, the Illuminati. And, I was like, yeah. And the reason I know this is because I had experience with Illuminati stuff back in my day. So I was like, no. I was like, dude, this it's a transliterated name. And he was like, what does that mean? So I basically spent that day of class explaining how transliteration works, that when you read like, Joseph, that it wasn't Joseph, it's Joseph, and Judah, not Judas, or Judas, that sort of thing. Jesus, Yeshua, or Yeshu. And so I did this video. Basically, I was like, I'll just do a video on that. So I did this video explaining it, and I went to bed, and I woke up next morning, and I'm like working out, right? I'm working out, and like all of a sudden my phone, because at that time I kept my notifications on. I can't do that now. My phone just starts like, like this. And I was like, what is going on? My wife's like, what is going on with your phone? I was like, I don't know. And I like picked up my phone, and like this thing had gone viral, and had just had like just overnight had 500,000 views. Wow. And I was like, holy moly, wow. And then I was like, okay, well, so let's talk about this stuff, because apparently there's a hunger for it. But out of that grew this my content kind of falls in 4 different categories. I do history. I'll do things that have conspiracy theories. I'll do things that have been taken out of context. That's a big one. And then I'll just kind of talk about mission stuff. And then I'll talk about like just some things that I've noticed in the church that kind of make me go, ooh, a little bit, and potential solutions to that. I don't just like to just smash stuff and just by like church bad. I don't believe that at all. I think the church is beautiful. The church is the bride. The church is the bride. Yeah. And so with that's kind of what's grown up, and now there's like 250,000 followers. It's weird. But yeah. So that's me in a nutshell. So I just say that, I'm a son. I'm a son. I'm not the son, but I'm a son, and I'm a husband. I'm a dad. Those are the 3 most important things in my life. But yeah, and we've got a great support system of loving family. Family is the essence of everything that we do. And I think that comes through a lot when on TikTok. It just kind of, there's a lot of, I've got friends on TikTok that have great accounts that are amazing, and some of them court controversial views, but they are amazing at explaining stuff, and they're amazing at breaking stuff down. But there is a compassion that you don't necessarily feel. So I work. I don't want to say I work hard, but I work to make sure people can feel the heart of what's in here coming out through what I'm saying, because people can listen to you, but I don't want people to just listen. I want people to feel, and I'm a person that I'm either really quiet or I'm wide open. And you guys are getting the wide open version right now. There is no, it's just wide open. And that's because that's how my mind operates. And it's just like, people are like, how do you remember all this stuff? And it's just, I don't know. It's just, I can't tell you where my keys are right now. Actually, I can. They're in my pocket. But normally I can't. I can't tell you where my keys are. I can't tell you where the car's parked. And I'm usually missing one of my 4 children. I'm usually missing one. So, but all this other sorts of stuff, it just gets stuck up in there, and it just rolls out when I need it, I guess. So
something that often, whenever we are discussing discipleship, specifically whenever it comes to digital and in person, I think people don't understand that discipleship doesn't necessarily look like talking all the time. In fact, I would say the most effective way to disciple people has nothing to do with words at all. It's really through action and through demonstrating to them that this is who I am because of Christ in me. And that doesn't require words necessarily. It's showing up for people, and it's consistently demonstrating that, if you come in here a hot mess or totally cleaned up, I'm going to treat you the same. I'm going to make sure that you're good. I mentor because of my history. Because I was an escort for 5 years, and I worked very closely in the world with pimps and trafficked girls, and I work directly with human trafficking victims as well. So I mentor them several times a week, and I help them get apartments, and I help them turn their electricity on, and I sit with them whenever they're, like in hospitals getting STD screenings and all of the things. And I don't ever really talk to them about Jesus with my words. I just, if they call and say, hey, I have to go to court next week, and, I don't have anyone to go with me, tell me what time and I'm going to show up. And then over time, then they start saying, why are you doing this?
Yep.
Like everybody else hates me, or they think that I'm dirty and yucky because of something that I was forced into. Why do you keep showing up? Like, why are you having your family help me turn my electricity on? Like, and I think that that's a part of, especially in Western culture, I would say, we talk a lot about doing life with people, per your point, that horrible phrase, but we don't actually do life with people, right? Like, we don't actually do that. We say, come to this church and do life with us. And what doing life means is sitting next to me without speaking through an entire sermon. And then I'm going to go back to my life, and you're going to go back to your life. And then we're going to have like angry attack fingers on the internet telling people that they're trying to help. And then the person that sits next to me in church is going to see that I behave that way. And then it's just like this whole messy thing. And really what it boils down to is Jesus never chased anyone around and said, you need to believe in me. Like, he didn't beat anyone over the head. He literally walked with people and sat with people and had conversations with people and showed up for people. And I actually posted a clip on Hybrid Disciples Instagram page, and it's TD Jakes talking about how Jesus healed people and he would tell them, don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
Like, don't tell anybody. Like, and we have such an opposite mentality. So I would say, like, with that in mind, whenever you're talking about both the work that you do in Puerto Rico, the work you're doing in Wales, and then even the stuff that you put on TikTok, it really just feels very much like, this is who I am. And if you have questions, and you're welcome to ask me, but this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. This is how I can benefit you, just because that's the core of who I am through being a son, as you said. How would you advise people who maybe are in ministry, like officially, or maybe they're just, random Christ followers who want to have that impact on someone? What would you say the mindset has to be whenever you're going into a public platform online, specifically, to kind of translate that to people?
Sure. Let me start this with a story. So in Wales, we had to have a mission sending organization sponsor us. And they were an evangelical group. They knew that we weren't evangelical, but they believed in the mission of what we want to do. Because to go to a foreign country to spend any length of time, you have to have a visa. So they sponsored our visa. And as part of this visa process, or as part of the sponsorship process, every quarter I would have to send in these quarterly reports. And we were very unique because most of the missionaries that were in the country with us, with this organization, led churches, right? They were pastors. Obviously, we are not. We are pastors, but I told them straight out. I was like, look, I'm not pastoring a church. I was like, that's not what God's telling me to do. I was like, I will pastor people, but I'm not pastoring a church. And they were cool with that. But most of the people that we were with were pastors in a church. And so they would, had to fill out these reports. How many people, got saved? How many baptisms did you do? Da, da, da. And that's how they quantify success. Mm-hmm. Was basically conversions, baptisms. Yep. And then comes, how much are they tithing? But that's pretty much like the requirements, right? Like that is the gauge of a successful ministry to a Western-minded church. And I would send in these reports and I would never answer those questions, ever. Now, was I with people and lead them in a prayer that's not in the Bible? Yeah, sure. Because I knew that that's what they needed, but God doesn't need that. Because there's no sinner's prayer in the Bible, right? It does not exist. And so one day I get a phone call saying, hey, what's going on? And I'm like, what you mean? And they were like, well, you're not, how many people are you leading to Christ? How many people are saved because of you being here? And I was like, I don't know. And he was like, well, what do you mean? And I was like, well, how many people have you, led them in the prayer? I was like, I don't know. And he's like, so wait, he goes, well, how do you know you've led someone to Christ? And I was like, how do you know you've led someone to Christ? And this guy oversees Europe, by the way. And I was like, how do you know? And I was like, because being in a relationship with Christ is being in a relationship with Christ. I was like, I meet plenty of people who are this way one way, and then they're really not that way. I was like, that's not a gauge. I was like, that's not a gauge of success to me. I was like, what a gauge of success is to me is the impact that we're having in the community and how people are responding to what we are doing, and are they joining in? And he was like, well, can you send me pictures or something? So I was like, sure, man. I was like, we gotta worship. Like, I'll send you some pictures. And I send all these pictures, and they were great pictures, And he goes, all right. He goes, I don't know what you're doing. He was like, but whatever you're doing is working. And he was like, so don't worry about sending me any more reports. And I was like, cool. And I was the only white missionary that actually kind of got away with that. I say all that to say this, is that we have got to accept that how we gauge success is not how Christ gauges success. And God gauges, Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. And the next commandment is like it, love your neighbor as you love yourself. All right. That is the summation of the law. That is the law that is written upon our heart, right? Like, it's no longer written on stone, written on heart. Okay. I can't lead anyone to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
I can't. I accepted that. Okay. What I can do is I can show Christ. I can demonstrate Christ to the best of my ability. Okay. That, we are all Christians, which means people get all up in arms when they find out about this, but this is the origin of the name. The name Christian means little Christ.
Little Jesus.
Mm.
That's what it means. It was an insult in Antioch that they lobbed at the followers of the way. And they did the right thing. They turned the other cheek and they were like, you know what? We are little Christs. And Peter said, that name should stick. All right. And we become, that we're known as Christians. We are known as little Christs. That's what we're supposed to be. We are sons of the Most High God. And when I say sons, I also mean daughters. I'm not being gender specific here. So what I tell people to have an effect is forget the standard Western measures of success. It's not about how much money you raise. It's not about how much your new membership. It's not about none of those things. Not a one of those things showed anybody had a successful ministry. Paul, when he was going, he wanted to go into Asia, has a dream. He's like, man, not going there. They end up going to Philippi. Goes into Philippi, goes to look for a synagogue. They don't even have a synagogue. So he goes back down. They used to, Jews in the city would, they didn't have a synagogue. They would have like a little prayer area near a pool for their rituals, cleanliness and stuff. So he goes down there and he's got his boys with him, and they go down and, Paul, Silas, and Timothy, and they go down and they can't even find any dudes, right? They can't find any men. Paul's like, I don't care. Let's start talking to the ladies. Paul gets a bad rap because of the way his words have been twisted and taken out of context and all different types of stuff. And, they're like, Paul said some horrible things. I'm like, let's look historically and let's look contextually how that actually happened. Context. But, and he's like, hey, I'm going to minister to these ladies. And one of those ladies is Lydia, who becomes the first leader of a church in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The first leader of a church in Europe was a woman. And that's in Acts. That's not me. That's in Acts. That's in your Bible. Right? The first leader of a church in Europe is a woman. And so you have this situation, and like what most people would consider a ministry failure. All right? Not evangelizing the whole city. Like, he met the one person, and that's what I always say. I always don't worry about the numbers. Don't worry about like you're not being graded on anything. Just be who you are, who God created you to be. Let that love well up inside you, and look for the one. Look for the one life. Look for the one, because Jesus was always consumed. He was consumed with the one. Mm-hmm. He was consumed with the one, and he was consumed with the one. And that's what he did. He met people relationally. How many stories are in the Bible of Jesus dealing one-on-one, especially with women? You didn't do that when you were a rabbi in the first century. That was a big no-no. And Jesus specifically went after the one. He even says, 99, one goes away, right? Let's go after the one. So you just go after the one and like change one life. You never know, whose life you're changing. That's why like a lot of people get obsessed over views and stuff, on TikTok. I'm like, man, I don't care. I got some videos that get like 1,000 views, and I'll give it like, man, I don't know why this is not getting any views. TikTok's startling me, which they do sometimes, but that's just part of the game, part of the algorithm. But like in reality, what I'm looking for is the one, and that is my advice to any person doing anything, is the one. Be looking for the one, because the one could change the world. Jesus could have come back, with a bunch of angels and descended upon the temple of Jerusalem and said, I am here. Like he could have done that at any point in time. He could have done that. What does he do? He goes and gets fishermen, farmers,
hot-headed fishermen,
zealots. He gets people that kill. He gets a guy that has killed Romans, a zealot, like to earn that name, you've killed. Okay? So he gets a zealot, and he gets a Roman tax collector. And he puts them in this small group of people. Like, I'm sitting here going, dude, Jesus is like an evil scientist a lot of times. Let's put these together and see if they explode. But that's just how awesome he is. And we've got to get out of this Western mindset of success, of grading ourselves based on the size of our ministry. Man, some of the most powerful, intimate times I've had with the Lord has just been me. Has been with in these small, teeny tiny churches. Now I've been in big churches and amazing things have happened. Okay. It's not about that. What it's about though is keying in and finding the one. And I think, and it doesn't look sexy. I can't get on Facebook and post my picture and these are all the people I led to Christ. Like, nothing against him, man, because like he was there are some great men that do this stuff, but these big rallies and there's 1 million people saved today. How do you know? You discipling them?
Yeah.
Like they might have said a prayer, they go right back to and you checked it on a box, but they go right back to life as normal in 2 or 3 weeks.
That's Francis Chan, who I very much respect. He actually was talking about how we cannot determine whether or not somebody that said a prayer is following Christ. That takes time, because you have to see the growth and the transformation in their life. And how whenever he said that he learned this from a mentor of his who he had gone to, and when he was an early pastor, and was like, I'm so excited because that man had preached. And so Francis said, wow, you had this many salvations, in service today. And the man said, and he said, aren't you excited? And he said, well, no, because I don't know that I had that many. And I won't know that I had that many until it takes time. And he said, and then additionally saying a prayer, like acknowledging that this is something that you need, and then actually implementing it into your life, that's a completely different kettle of fish, essentially. And that he said, we need to be more, he's like, now we have these however many hundred people that profess that they want to have a relationship with Christ. I'm excited that there's the desire, but what are we doing to step into their lives to actually make sure that they know the way to implement that? And I feel like in the body of Christ in certain places, we just have a disconnect there.
Oh, yeah.
We think that the acknowledgement is the following. And, I can say from personal experience, I said a prayer and meant it when I was 5 years old. Like, I remember when it happened, the whole thing. I grew up in church. And then when I was 22 years old, I told God to get kicked rocks, and I wasn't going to have anything to do with him, because I didn't actually have like a personal transformation experience. I had like an understanding that I thought that that's what I wanted. But then I spent the next 14 years of my life whiling out, doing the absolute most. And it wasn't until whenever I gave my life to Jesus, I ended up, I hadn't been in church in years, and I had an in-person situation with God too, and took my behind to a women's Bible study, and then ended up giving my life to Jesus that day. And there was a prayer said, but you know what actually caused me to be like, this is for real, was I woke up that morning and I was a full-on prostitute. I was living in a client's house. And I went to this church and I professed that I wanted to know Jesus. The guy said, okay, cool. But by the end of the day, the man who I was escorting for at the time said, that's cool, but you got to get out of my house by the end of the day today. And I'm like, what? Like I have a 20-year-old and an 18-year-old. They were little at the time, but they were living there too. And I'm like, where am I going to go? And I called this lady, her name's Donna. She's like my spiritual mom. And that woman has been rocking with me for, 10 years now. But I called her and I said, hey, I know I just met you like an hour ago and you just prayed with me to give my life to Jesus, but like, I'm about to be homeless.
Now I got a problem.
Yeah. And, that woman, she rallied an army of old women from that church who showed up at my house, had the entire thing packed up. They, not me, organized for me to get a new apartment and moved my behind in there. And this whole thing took like 5 hours. I mean, it was like, and I tell people and I have goosebumps, like the reason that I was like, this is for real, wasn't because I said a prayer in a women's Bible study that morning. Yeah. It was because an army of little old women who professed to love Jesus actually showed up the way that Jesus would have.
That's it. Yep. That's it. 100%.
And I woke up a prostitute and I went to bed in a brand new apartment, like following Jesus. And I have never gone back. I've never gone back.
Oh man, that's awesome.
We got to like understand that it's not so much the prayer. It's what do we demonstrate to people whenever they're in really dire moments.
That's it. 100%.
And showing up for them.
100%. So,
yeah.
And that is the assembly.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the, oh, we're going to go together, get in this big building and, hey, don't sit in my seat or I'm going to spread bad rumors about you. Kind of deal. It's actually doing. I was on a podcast a while back. They were like, what do you look out for in church? Because I did the series on church as a business, and they were like, what is the number one thing you look out for? And I'm like, people that just sit in seats, like they don't get out of the church. That churches that don't have a mission programs, like real mission programs, churches that aren't paying for it, are paying, but giving to indigenous missionaries, people that aren't doing something in the community, churches. Otherwise, it's just a social club,
mm-hmm.
And so like what you guys are doing, like the bravery that you have to get out in the digital space, which right now is like the Wild West, and actually like, dude. Your ministry, man, Andy, like that is like really cool too. Cause I've got a friend who's been working in that realm. And he doesn't really do it anymore because he ended up getting married. So he doesn't have time to game anymore. And he's involved with this awesome ministry in Wales, but he, like for the longest time, that's what he would do. He would get out online and then like just be in the middle of like fragging somebody and just be like, dude, like, oh, dude, Jesus did this amazing thing in my life today. And just like, like take this conversation. And like oh my gosh, like working with like people don't understand like what's going on. And I think that's the problem with a lot of church, like churches, there's this fear of what's outside, right? What's outside the four walls. They can control what's inside the four walls. They can't control what's outside the four walls. But we were never called to be within four walls. Like in every way that Jesus and Paul expressed the church, that it was never about a building, like all that stuff was added later, much later. It was always about, churches were house churches. People, it's one of those things in a Western mind, we project out and I talk about this in my TikToks a lot. Like we project out that, when Paul's writing letters to the churches, James, Jude, all these guys are writing letters to churches, they are not writing to church buildings. They are writing to these little house churches that are in cities. Like there was one, and it's slipping my mind. I'm going to be obsessed with this until I go look it up after we get off this call. There was one historian who estimated that there was only about 7,000 Christians by the end of the first century. 7,000 by the end of the first century, and like by this point, the destruction of the Temple of Jerusalem, the diaspora had happened, so most Christian converts are Gentile converts at this point in time, and so there's only 7,000. 7,000! Mm-hmm. And they're all in these little tiny churches, and they're all spread out everywhere. So it's not like they were just Christians like falling out of trees. It was like, they were these little groups that would operate, and it is historically a fact that when plagues would hit Rome, this is what made Christianity grow. When plagues would hit the Roman Empire, the Christians were the ones that stayed and went and helped the people in the street, whether they were pagan, whether they were Christian, didn't matter. They would go to the diseased. While everyone else was running out of town, it was the Christians that were going and taking care of and feeding these people. And Christianity as a religion, it started off like it was insulted as the religion of women, children, and slaves. Mm. That was the insult. It was the religion of women. But it was those people who were going and helping other people. And all of a sudden, that is what started to light these fires. So people want to go, hey, why is the church dying? The church isn't dying. The problem is we're not doing real church. Mm. The church is alive and well if we would just do what it is that we're supposed to do, which is love the Lord God with our heart, soul, mind, and strength, love your neighbor as you love yourself, and go out and live a sacrificial life. So that's like what you guys are doing. There's no, actually in your ministry, there's no big time honor. Mm. You know what I mean? Like there's from the world anyway. Mm-hmm. It's a subject that the world doesn't want to talk about. Mm-hmm. It's a subject that men in power, Johns, people like that, they don't want to talk about because bad things happen. You know what I mean? It's just kind of pushed out to the side, but it's a ministry that is deeply needed to go to these women that are suffering and to do just like those ladies did for you. Mm-hmm. And they don't know you. They didn't know what if you were strung out on 10 different types of drugs. They didn't know anything. But they came to your aid. And that is the strength. That is the strength and what separates the love of Jesus from everything else out there. It's sacrificial love. And that is what we in the church have been failing at considerably because we've been wanting to build these big palaces and you speak the gospel, and like all that sort of stuff. But are we living sacrificially? So yeah. All right. So I'm sorry. I've taken this thing all different types of directions, guys. I'm so sorry.
Great.
No, this is great. I have one more question and then I'll let Ashley do what she wants to do. But my question goes back to you made a statement at the very beginning of what we were talking about a little bit ago. And you said that if, we have this thing in our pockets, this supercomputer in our pockets that with a touch of a button, a swipe of a whatever, we can talk to anybody throughout the world. And that's what we do at Lux. Lux Digital Church is the church that I'm the creative pastor for. I was a worship pastor for about 10 years. After I got saved out of addiction, God led me into music. I was a worship pastor. That's what I did for about 10-ish, maybe 11-ish years. And then I was a digital pastor for about 5 years. God led me into that right before COVID happened, and then COVID blew the world up. And coming out of that, out of like full-time, I was out at a mega church, and that was a story in and of itself. But And it was a great church. Love the church. But there was a deeper calling into something that was more digital. And it was the buttons that I can push to talk to people all over the world. And Lux does that. We have a Discord server and a Twitch stream, and all this stuff. We're talking to 1,000 people every single day. We've got that's where our church is. We've got between 800 and 1,000 people in a Discord server, and that's where we meet 24/7. And they're all over the world, literally all across the world. People awesome. Are joining us, hearing about the Word of God, gaming together, hanging out together, doing all these things together. You have Ashley with 12 Church, who are influencing people in the inner cities through Instagram and through TikTok, which is like this mind-blowing thing that even 5 years ago we would have had to like take a second guess at. And I'm leading up to this big question of Paul was successful in his ministry because of the infrastructure of the Roman roads that had been built before he ever started doing ministry. That's what enabled him to get from, Jerusalem to the ends of the earth. Mm-hmm. We have that Roman road right here in our pockets. And my question to you is, do you believe in your heart of hearts that discipleship can happen online, or is it simply a facilitation towards something that has to happen in a one-on-one in-person meeting? That sounds like I'm setting you up, and I'm not. I truly want to know where your heart is on that.
No, I think there's, you could make so many arguments for or against, right? When I first got my minister's license, so I'm licensed in a couple of different countries, but in the UK, when I first got my minister's license, I had to leave before they could do the laying on of hands, right? I had to catch my train because I lived in Wales, and so I promise there's a point to the story. So I was like, "Hey guys, I gotta go. Thank you for the license. I'm out the door," and jumped on my plane because to me, I really didn't care, to be real, because it's who cares what this says, right? That's man's thing. That's not my, my thing, right? And I was like, "Hey, thanks," and then I had this pastor get in touch with me like 3 months later, and he was like, "Look, we need you to come back into London." And I was like, "Why?" And they were like, "Well, because we never got to the laying on of hands, so you're not officially a pastor." And I was like, "Okay, that's interesting." I was like, "So am I a pastor because of who I am and what I do and what I lead, or am I a pastor because you get to lay hands on me?" And we got in this big discourse, and I never went back to London to get that. But I say that because there is a traditional subset that you will never get off that rock. Yep. You will never get them off because they've made it foundational to who they are. And you know what? If that's what they believe, more power to them. But they do not get to dictate what makes an effective disciple. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I fully believe that you, can create effective disciples and do this effective discipling online. Now there is accountability, right? There obviously, because that's part of discipleship is accountability, right? Like I need to have a system of checks and balances, right? Mm-hmm. Like, yes, I receive everything from the Lord, but there are people that I have allowed into my life who I say, "Hey, this is kind of what's up, what I'm doing. What you think about that?" And they'll come back and say, "Hey, you feel the Lord." I mean, I've never had anybody go, "No," but you know what I mean? Like, if somebody comes up and says, "Hey, I'm really struggling in this area," part of discipleship isn't like, you don't have to be in person. You can disciple people. I know a guy who's literally discipling people through his mentorship programs, like all over the world, and he don't even know it. Like, you know what I mean? He's just like being himself, and he's like receiving and giving and giving and receiving, and he doesn't know for sure. But I think it can be done. Is it better to be done in person? I mean, you can make an argument there. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Is it required? No, definitely not. And I think also is we put a little too much weight on the in-person thing, because I can't disciple someone effectively. Like, I've said this before, and I got so much blowback because so many pastors hated me for it, but I actually said this. I actually said this on a stage. And I said, discipleship is not a Sunday afternoon program.
Mm-hmm.
That next week, they were actually starting up their Sunday afternoon discipleship program. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know, you know, and if I did know, it still probably wouldn't have changed what I said, because I'm kind of like that, if you couldn't tell. But it's not. It's not a program. It's not something that you do on Sunday and go sit in the classroom. It's doing life together. And if you're connected to somebody online for 3 or 4 hours and you're playing a game and you guys are talking and you're downloading each, you know, like information to one another, and you can actually feel that you can see their face, you can feel it, but you know, all this stuff. Yeah, absolutely you can. And I think it can be way more effective than the discipleship program on Sunday, which is basically just designed to plug you into a volunteer leaders program at the church. But anyway, we won't get onto that subject right now. But yeah, I completely believe, and I think that's what's happening in this generation. I get emails all the time of people going, "You've changed my life," and it's really freaking humbling, man. Just people will just send me these essays, and I feel horrible because, like, if I responded to every one of them, like, it would literally take me all day, all day, like literally 24 hours out of the day to respond the way I want to respond. So I have to respond in like 4 or 5 sentences. Hey, you know, thank you for reaching out. I really appreciate your story. Because I really do. And I mean, just this amazing stuff that people write all the time. And they're just like, man, you have literally like blown the lid off of religion for me. Like, I feel, and I'm not trying to toot my horn when I say this, but I'm a son. Okay. I'm a son. So I'm going to say it. Like, people will go, I feel Jesus, like, when I listen to you sometimes, like you say something and I just feel different, and it just knocks me off my kilter, and I want to be so mad at you. I get that a lot. I want to be so mad at you, you know, but I can't, you know, because I feel the truth of what you're saying. And not all my videos are like that, but you know, it does happen. And I'll sit back and I'm like, wow, in a weird way, that's kind of like starting a trigger moment for them to look for other resources to be discipled in that way. And I think in this generation of Gen Z and millennial people that are becoming more familiar with this phone thing right here, you know, like as that grows, I think that is the space that we need to grow into, and just need to accept it's not going to change. It's not going away. It's just going to get bigger and bigger. And then, you know, like, ideally what I think would be great is if you are discipling a lot of people online, or maybe not a lot, but maybe even a few, if you could have like one time of year where you get together physically, you know, and do a touch. You know, it doesn't have to be a big conference. It could just be like, I have a friend that lives down in Nicaragua, like, and he invites like a dozen people like that he mentors in his groups to just come down and spend a couple of weeks with them, you know, and they all come together, and it's this loving atmosphere, and it's amazing. They all share, and then they go back to their lives, and, you know, they've all made a touch. So I do think that physical presence is important, but is it required? Absolutely not. Because let's be real. Yeah, I've had a physical, tangential experience of Jesus, but most of the time I can't see him.
Yep.
Right? I can't see him. Now my little man, he'll come in here. He's 7 years old. He can tell you exactly where Jesus is, and he's like, Jesus is right over there. And he looks like this, and he's laughing, or he's smiling, or he's not. Like, he just has that kind of relationship, which is amazing. And that we've fostered that kind of relationship for him because the best discipleship program you're going to ever have is your kids, right? So with that, but like for me, like I know Jesus is there, right? So when you're connecting with someone digitally, right? Like it's much the same way, so I truly believe that is a huge part of the future about what the Lord is going to do. I think all this stuff, I deconstructed before deconstructing was cool. I deconstructed completely out of the faith, came back to the faith, and I'm happy for that deconstruction, because it is what triggered my brain to be able to look at scripture and things the way that I do. Deconstruction is terrifying to traditionalists, but I'm a big fan of it, but I also believe deconstruction without some kind of reconstruction is destruction. Now, they don't have to deconstruct, like everybody thinks, deconstructionists are all going to become atheists. I know a lot of people who have deconstructed and they've remained Christian. They just deconstructed the church model. They deconstructed the tradition. That's what you guys are doing, whether you know it or not. You're deconstructing the traditional mindset of what church actually is, and you are creating a foundational environment that other people can use as a blueprint for what they're doing to reach more people for Christ. And when I say reach more people for Christ, I don't mean so we can get them to say some magic prayer. I mean that we can actually lead people into realizing who they are in Christ and who God actually says they are. That's kind of my thing. So what you guys are doing is really cool. It's an honor for you guys to have me on. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I don't think I have any questions. I really, really appreciate your time and obviously just your insight and
your heart,
and not just here on the podcast,
and your heart as well. The fact that you're not willing to pull punches, the fact that you're willing to just kind of charge at things, that is, and not do it for likes and clicks and follows, not do it to be a shock jock or anything like that, but to actually stand up for something gospel related. Thank you for that.
Oh man, thanks. I appreciate that. Thank you.